Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest series of disasters concerning the Tories' Rwanda Plan, something that, as I've said several times, has done the Conservatives no good at all, only empowers Reform UK to siphon off a lot of their votes, and that is what makes this particularly frustrating. There are times when the Conservative Party commit pretty wicked acts and really make vulnerable people's lives much, much worse out of pure greed. But I understand greed. Greed is a motivating factor. It explains quite a lot in politics, particularly when it comes to Conservative politics. You can understand it. There's no point in complaining about it. That's what these people are. The best solution is just to stop them having power. But something like this is hurting the Conservatives. The Conservative Party are hurting some of the most vulnerable people in the country, and it's hurting them as well. It makes it extra ridiculous. Like the latest just has a Keystone Cops feel to it, only there's nothing funny about it because people's lives are being made much worse, endangered even because of a political ideology which isn't even benefiting the people driving it. First, the Tories were hailing their first Rwanda Plan flight last week. Oh, last week they'd only just got the legislation through. There's a big legal process. Surely they can't have actually sent asylum seekers to Rwanda yet. No, indeed they haven't. It was all a con. The government simply paid someone to allow them to fly to Rwanda for headlines. The person in question was not even technically an asylum seeker. They were an asylum seeker, but they'd had their application looked at and declined. This meant that the government had a legal right to deport them anyway. Didn't need to pay them to do anything. But as they hadn't come from Rwanda, they weren't supposed to deport them to Rwanda. But the thing is, we deport failed asylum seekers all the time, so that doesn't generate headlines. So the government offered the person £3,000 to be deported specifically to Rwanda because that will get headlines. The person agreed, only when UK journalists, including from the Express, tried to follow them up in Rwanda, they disappeared. The British taxpayer has paid millions of pounds for a hostel where these refugees should initially be accommodated, but journalists found that it was not in operation, and this first so-called Rwanda-bound refugee was nowhere to be seen in the entire country. Like, nowhere. They've gone without trace. It's possible they just used some of the money we gave them to hop back on a flight to the UK, who knows. And it gets even more ridiculous than that. Paul Cotterill, a care worker who often digs deep into issues like this, he should really get more of a following, I think, has been widely pointing something else out. As part of the Rwanda agreement, refugees being sent to Rwanda as part of our treaty must be issued with Rwandan ID papers. This is because they're not prisoners in Rwanda, so they're just supposed to live their life there. But, like anyone else, they can go on holiday or go abroad for business or something like that. And if they need to leave the country, of course they need documentation. However, because the government, despite what it tells the media, does understand that Rwanda is not in actual fact a safe country for everyone, we accept asylum claims from refugees fleeing Rwanda. In fact, we've even granted asylum to people from Rwanda recently, since the agreement was signed. As a result, there's another part of the agreement, which isn't mentioned much in the media, that holds that we cannot send any refugees from Rwanda back to Rwanda. So if someone comes to the UK claiming asylum and they've come from Rwanda, we can't stick them on a plane for Rwanda to deal with that process. So this refugee that we sent to Rwanda last week, the one who's disappeared without trace, presumably we made sure they had Rwandan ID papers as per the agreement. That would mean that if they did come back to the UK and wanted to, make another asylum claim, I'm not sure whether they'd be able to, given that it has been declined. But let's say we couldn't send them back to Rwanda. Now, I'm not saying, as I say, this is what's going to happen, but even the potential for this level of farce invites awkward questions for the government should any journalist bother to ask them. We have presumably given documents to this person that we've sent to Rwanda that mean, should they ever return to the UK, and they're free to do so, we can't send them back. Even the Express, when they reported on the disappearance of this refugee, seemed to be describing the Rwanda plan as a waste of money at this point. So even some supporters of the plan are now starting to become frustrated with the whole thing. And in terms of the real Rwanda plan, because that's not the real Rwanda plan, the real Rwanda plan is to send people whose claims have not been processed at all. The idea of sending asylum seekers whose claims are going to be processed in Rwanda, not the UK. The government are storing up more trouble for themselves as well, who've now got more and more reports emerging that the Home Office has completely lost contact with a certain number of the asylum seekers that they had earmarked for deportation to Rwanda. Because, of course, they didn't want to go to Rwanda. But where they're inviting real trouble is in the reports of some who have been detained, really suffering, with at least one on suicide watch. Now, when it comes to asylum, the Tories and their client media often persuade a lot of people that they're not genuine asylum seekers. You see, they're sneaky little chaps. They're economic migrants, but they're coming over illegally, so they're illegal migrants, right? They don't manage to persuade anything close to a majority that we shouldn't be helping those in need. So they tell us that these people aren't in need. This is why they use the phrase illegal immigrant, even though claiming asylum in the UK, even if you entered the country without permission, is perfectly legal. But the emphasis on illegal immigrant or illegal migrant, those sort of terms, or talking about economic migrants, it's all about persuading people that these asylum seekers aren't actually vulnerable, right? If the public see this as a lie, the Tories lose more support, because actually the majority of people in this country are not heartless bastards. And it's not like they've got support from a majority as it is. I mean, look at what happened when the Tories killed someone aboard the Bibi Stockholm. That went badly for them. Took a while before the government could get people to forget about that. Well, they risk a real tragedy occurring here, but in the run-up to the general election. And again, you set this against what the Conservatives actually gain here. Like, what is it? The Rwanda Plan is specifically designed to appeal to those who don't want us accepting asylum seekers. So how does the Rwanda Plan tackle this concern? It doesn't. If we had safe routes for asylum and then dealt with claims properly, there'd be no visible signs of asylum in the UK at all. The best Nigel Farage could do is point to a graph. Reform UK grew their support against a background of large numbers of asylum seekers crossing the channel. You've got photographs of it. And then the increasing volume of accommodation which was needed to house them. Photographs of that. There were focal points, there were physical, tangible things, visible signs of the process, which existed only because of Conservative Party policy. And Reform UK fed upon it. If Sunak really wants to win those votes back from Reform, if it's even possible, then if it was the visibility of asylum which caused the problem, then the solution cannot be more of the same. I don't know what's going to happen with flights to Rwanda. The best information seems to be that maybe a flight or two of limited numbers of asylum seekers can be sent. But even this has a number of dependent factors, not the least of which is whether the courts rule that civil servants will not be breaking the law in processing the policy. What I do know, however, is that the boats are not going to stop this summer. The major factor determining numbers is going to be the weather. After all, there's no shortage of instability in the world, not being helped by our lack of international development funding and interest. So there's no way headlines appear which hail the end or even drastic reduction in small boat crossings without the government setting up ways to claim asylum on the other side of the channel. And the government have no interest in doing so. Of all the myriad immediate futures we may be looking at, by far and away the most likely are those which talk of large numbers of asylum seekers continuing to cross the channel, sometimes fatally. Yes, the news media are going to have plenty of distractions. There's the Euros, there's the Olympics. They'll have ample opportunity to hide political news stories which they don't want to publish. But Sunak doesn't need an absence of political news. That's useful for retaining votes, sure. But Sunak needs to win votes back. He needs the news stories to do that. It's just that he needs the news stories to be positive from his point of view, to fit his narrative. But in no reality does this seem credible. And I'm not sure it makes much difference whether the news stories talk of record channel crossings this summer, although that is the worst case scenario for Sunak, or merely large numbers continuing, albeit not quite record numbers. They're not going to talk about a drastic reduction, and certainly not an end to them. At this point, it's Reform UK who will use the asylum situation to their advantage again. So the Tories are now worsening the mental health of people who are amongst the most vulnerable in the country. Many are being driven into forced slavery. This is all going to cost us. It costs us in basic humanity, but it costs us economically, because it's going to cost the taxpayer more money to clear this mess up than it ever would have to simply process the claims, allowing successful claimants to work in an economy which is desperately short of workers, and to deport those who are not successful. No fuss from any court. And the political cost of this trajectory doesn't bear thinking about. The very Tory MPs behind the Rwanda Plan never intended it to work. They're not idiots. Some of them are idiots. But they never intended it to work. After all, how could it? They needed it to fail so they could propose a more extreme solution. The solution is ending all human rights laws in the UK. Oh, but it won't affect you, don't worry. Even though we'll be taking away your human rights, you'll be fine. We're only doing it to stop these nasty little chappies coming across on boats. Now, Brexit was the first step to this. The second step was creating this so-called asylum crisis. Remember, neither this huge backlog of asylum claims nor the channel crossings were a thing back in 2017. Weren't a thing, didn't exist. The third step is persuading us to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. And to think that so-called moderate Tories have gone along with the Rwanda Plan to appease the far right, when the far right had no interest in the plan working. In worst case scenario for them, the plan working, they don't want the plan to work. They don't care about asylum seekers. They don't care about taking away the human rights of a few tens of thousands of people. They want to take away the human rights of 68 million people. It was always intended to be a monumental failure for which the moderates would take the blame and lead to full-blown fascism in the UK as the only alternative plan. All of the asylum seekers suffering now with the latest twists and turns of this nonsense are suffering so that even the people inflicting that suffering end up losing. They're about to lose their political power anyway, but they're also going to lose power within the Conservative Party itself, and so disappears their roots to any return to power. The Conservative Party may come back in the future, but the way things are going, it won't be the Conservatives running it. It'll be the extremists and populists, the proper Tories. And they're all too stupid to see it. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.